Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me today. I so wish that we could be together in person, but I wanted to take some time this afternoon to give an update on the actions that Congress is taking in response to the heartbreaking and infuriating events of last week. I also want to share some timely information on a few COVID-19 relief programs, including the Paycheck Protection Program loans and direct relief payments. And then we're going to have some time to answer questions that you may have. Now, it goes without saying that this has been an incredibly difficult week for our country. Ever since the violent, treasonous attack on the Capitol, my office has been flooded with messages from constituents across the 14th District. Messages of disbelief that our Capitol, which is the global symbol of our republic, could be attacked in an attempt to thwart our democracy in the name of so-called patriotism. The messages of anger that more wasn't done to prevent the violence, anger at the years of inflammatory rhetoric and elected leaders capitalizing on hate and anti-democratic sentiments. Messages of fear. The events that took place last week were a harsh reminder that our democracy is fragile and that the peaceful transition of power must never be taken for granted. But also messages full of support, well wishes, and prayers for the safety of myself, my staff, and everyone working at the Capitol during the insurrection. I truly appreciate the kind words that so many of you sent, and it has been a balm in an otherwise difficult time. For every person that called, every person watching this town hall right now live, or is taking the time to watch the video later, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to reach out to my office. I want you to know that I hear you and I see you, and I'll continue to fight for you and fight to protect our democracy every day. The deadly attack was incited by the President of the United States and was supported by some Republicans in the House and Senate. It was an infuriating and un-American disgrace. There should be no historical sanctuary for those who ignited this fire, and that is why Congress must act. The President of the United States presents a clear and present danger to our democracy and to the security of our country. In order to faithfully carry out the oath I swore to uphold the Constitution, I must work to remove him from office as soon as possible. The Constitution provides narrow options for removing a president from office. One is for the House to impeach and the Senate to convict the president. Now, the other is for the vice president and members of the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment if they determine that the president is unable to discharge the powers and the duties of his office. Tonight, I will vote to call on the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment. And if he does not, I will vote to impeach the president. This is not something that I do lightly. This weekend, I hosted a virtual swearing-in ceremony, and I took the oath of office here in the 14th District of Illinois and pledged to uphold the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. These were not symbolic words, but a solemn oath that I took to fight for the preservation of our democracy against a real threat to its survival. And as we were all reminded this week, our democracy is fragile, and perhaps more fragile than we realized. The actions that we take now are not about one man, one president, or one election. The actions we take must be about our values as a country, our belief in democracy, and our willingness to fight for its preservation. The heartbreaking events of this week are only compounded by difficulties that we faced over the last year. Families in every corner of the 14th District have been devastated by the coronavirus pandemic. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. We have a long road of recovery ahead from the effects of the pandemic, but together we will rebuild. In December, Congress passed a legislative package that contained emergency coronavirus relief and a government funding package to save the lives and livelihoods of the American people. Help is on the way to our community already, and I wanted to give an update on two programs. First, many of you may have already received your direct relief payment or economic impact payment of up to $600 per adult and $600 per child. I know this payment does not do enough to provide relief to families in our community, and I'm going to continue to fight for more financial relief until our economy has recovered from the pandemic. For those who have not yet received a payment, I'm going to share shortly a few ways that you can check on the status of your payment. Secondly, the Small Business Administration began reopening the Paycheck Protection Program, also known as PPP, on Monday, so yesterday, for new borrowers and certain existing PPP borrowers. Now, initially, these loans will only be open to community financial institutions, but PPP will open to all participating lenders soon with updated guidelines, including new eligibility requirements and funding usage. We have a lot more work to do, and I plan to continue to deliver economic relief and federal resources to our communities impacted by the pandemic. Now, I want to hear from you. So if you have a question, please type it below in the comments. And as you do that, I'm going to go over a few of the most common questions that I've been getting over the last few days. So first, people are asking, why haven't I received an economic impact payment? So those are the stimulus checks. Okay, so the IRS is continuing to send out these EIP payments, economic impact payments. If you believe that you should receive one, but you haven't gotten it yet, you can check the status of your payment at irs.gov, so .gov. And if you're qualified to receive an EIP payment, so a check, but do not receive it, the IRS advises that you file your 2020 tax return electronically and claim what they're calling a recovery rebate credit on your tax return. Okay, so people can start filing their taxes like now. And if you do it electronically, you'll get processed faster and take a look for something called a recovery rebate credit on your paperwork. Okay, the next question is, how do I apply for the additional Paycheck Protection Program loans for my small business? So Congress passed additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program in the latest COVID relief package. Now, that was at the end of December, that bill. The PPP loan portal opened up yesterday on January 11th. You can apply through any existing SBA 7A lender, which if you are thinking about this, you know what I mean by that, or through any federally insured depository institution, federally insured credit union, and Farm Credit System institution that's participating. So basically, your bank, your credit union, your farm credit system, okay? We're getting questions about vaccines, and people want to sign up to get a vaccine. You may have seen a link that we posted about getting additional information from your local health department. Every county health department has a separate process for vaccine distribution. And as you know, in the 14th district, we have 7 counties. Some health departments have a system to sign up for a vaccine, and others just have a notification system that will provide you with the most up-to-date information. We will repost the links to each health department in the comments right now. My staff is going to do that. So just remember that vaccines are safe and effective, and they are an essential way to control the virus and start us on this path towards economic recovery. It's really important. So there's a question about the 25th Amendment. Will the cabinet and the vice president invoke the 25th Amendment? And I certainly hope that the vice president will fulfill his duty and do so. The president is a clear and present danger, and he must be removed from office as soon as possible. If the vice president does not act, I will move forward with my colleagues and vote to impeach the president. And so people are asking about the timeline for impeachment and how this whole thing works. So tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the House will vote on an article of impeachment against President Trump for inciting an insurrection. The Senate is not set to reconvene until January 19th, which is next week, which means that if the House sends over the impeachment article, the earliest that the Senate would likely vote is the last day that the president would be in office. The Senate could still proceed to a trial after the president leaves office. And if convicted, remember it's the Senate that has the trial and can make conviction, he, meaning President Trump, would be banned from holding federal office ever again. Okay, so those were just a few of the questions that we've been getting, and I see that we have a lot of comments or questions. So let's see. So Jamie had a question, where was I during the Capitol assault, and was I potentially exposed to COVID? Okay, so when the joint session of Congress began last week on Wednesday, which was counting the electoral college votes and the electors, that process, I was in my congressional office. You all may know that we recently moved offices. And so we were in our new office, we being my chief of staff and I, and that is where we first received the alerts about the breaching of the Capitol, the evacuations of other House office buildings. And we quickly sprung into action, moving furniture to barricade the doors to our office, getting lots of alerts from Capitol Police, and eventually was taken to an undisclosed location to basically be safe with other colleagues under the direct supervision of the Capitol Police. It is in that room that you may have seen several members of Congress without masks and refusing masks when offered to them. And it is in that room that several folks have now been diagnosed with COVID-19. So that's what's going on. Let's see. Lots of comments. I'm reading through to answer your questions, so keep putting them in the chat. Okay, there's a question about freedom of speech with social media sites, and this is from Bruce. And so, these social media sites are owned by, they're companies. And so, what's really interesting that I've learned in my work on the House Homeland Security Committee is that these companies set their own terms of use, their own policies, and they are free to set criteria. They typically call them like community guidelines for folks to be able to have accounts and maintain good standing on those sites. For those people who elect to use these sites, like we're on Facebook right now, they have to agree to those community guidelines in order to have an account. If you're found to have acted in a way that is not in compliance, then you will often see that your account may be suspended, or you have to delete a post. Like Twitter does that sometimes, you have to delete a post in order to be unlocked, or there might be some kind of time frame that folks are suspended. And that is certainly within the constitutional realm of reason, because they are private companies, and that is part of the user agreement. And so I know that there's a lot of conversation about the First Amendment, but I think that it's really important to remember that these are companies that the user has agreed to abide by certain codes of conduct that may have been breached. I hope that that's helpful to you, Bruce. Okay, let's see. The vaccine. Okay, Bob had a comment about the vaccine. Bob, I'm going to encourage you to visit the webpage of your local health department. And I know that many of our local healthcare systems, so like your primary care provider, has also been getting in touch with their patients to let you know how you can get your vaccine from your primary care provider. Now, I know that not everyone has a primary care provider. And so we know that some retail pharmacy chains, right, like CVS and Walgreens in our communities, and others, of course, will also be distributing COVID vaccines. So keep your ears open, because your notice may come from your primary care provider, it may come from your health department, it may come from your local pharmacy. But I know that folks are very interested in getting vaccinated. We know the state of Illinois is considering going to like the next phase of opening up eligibility, which is positive. And so we're going to continue to share information with our community as more and more vaccine becomes available. Okay, let's see. Okay, Steve had a question about the 14th Amendment. So you may have heard some discussion about other members of the House putting forward legislation to discipline in some way members of Congress who did some of the above, which could include supporting the decision, the effort to overturn the electoral votes, people who were very openly supportive of last week's violent insurrection, and people who encouraged in some way. So either participated in the rally or, in some way were actively involved in engaging with those folks who breached the Capitol. That there are kind of a range of disciplinary actions that can be taken, everything from, the Republican conference deciding to strip folks of committee assignments to a formal censure in the House to, a constitutional action like Steve is referencing with the 14th Amendment. I'll just say that a lot of this is being discussed, and I'm certainly interested in hearing from our community in terms of your preferences to that end. And I think what is very clear is that we being members of the Congress, swore an oath to protect and defend our Constitution. And last week's attack runs directly counter to that. And I believe that there should be accountability. It is my hope that something like this never happens again. And part of our way of ensuring that is by taking certain disciplinary and accountability measures. Thank you. Okay, Bruce had another question about when the first round of PPP loans will be forgiven. And Bruce, if you are a PPP recipient, or, on behalf of your business, I would encourage a few things. Number one, to be in touch with your lender. Because as you know, the legislation that we recently passed did make some what I would call programmatic changes to the Paycheck Protection Program. Two, I would invite you to be in touch with our office if the information that you are receiving, whether it's from the IRS or from your lender, are incomplete, contradictory, confusing. You can always give us a call at 630-549-2190. You can see that on your screen, and we'll also be in the chat for folks who want to reach out. We have several constituent services representatives who've been helping a lot of folks across our community, whether it's with the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, or the Economic Impact Payments, which are those direct checks to individuals and families in our communities. We know that this type of economic relief is really important, and the loan forgiveness is the key factor that made PPP so attractive. And so we'd be happy to work with you one-on-one on that issue, Bruce, or anyone else who's interested in that topic. Okay. So David's question is, do I support Jim Clyburn's idea of sending the impeachment articles to the Senate 100 days after the Biden administration takes office? So it is my understanding, David, that I'll say it like this, if Vice President Pence does not choose to invoke the 25th Amendment before sometime tomorrow, then the House will vote on impeachment. That is expected to pass. And it is my expectation that the articles will be sent to the Senate immediately. Yesterday, we heard President-elect Biden make a statement that he would envision the Senate working to confirm cabinet nominees in the morning and then conduct a impeachment trial in the afternoon once that trial is underway. So I think that there probably are a few ways that the Senate could make it happen, but I don't think that the delay is something that is being actively considered at this point in time. Okay. Okay, Amy has a question, which I think is, we didn't talk about this. So in the last Congress, I served on 3 committees: Education and Labor, on Veterans Affairs, and on Homeland Security. On Homeland Security, I was the vice chair of the full committee and was the subcommittee chair for cybersecurity, infrastructure protection, and innovation. I'm no longer serving on those committees. I'm currently serving on the House Appropriations Committee. And so I hope to continue to keep you all updated on our work on that committee and moving bills throughout the Congress. Okay, Moni had a question about the 2 Capitol Police officers that died. This is so awful, so tragic, that we did lose 2 really key members of our Capitol Hill community with the deaths of these 2 officers. I have expressed my condolences to their families, and certainly recognize that this is an extremely challenging time with those who still are recovering from injuries and suffering from the psychological trauma of last week's attack. I did not know them personally. There's about 2,000 officers on the Capitol Police Force. And so, and obviously now with the reinforcements that are on Capitol Hill from the National Guard, there is a considerable law enforcement presence on the Hill ahead of, with what's going on this week and then inauguration next week. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so John had an IRS question about account numbers. John, if you are having a hard time getting in touch with the IRS, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office. Again, our phone number is 630-549-2190, and we will be happy to help you with any paperwork in order to correct that type of filing error or, typos or whatever the circumstance may be with your account numbers. Okay. Okay, Donald had a question about due process. And Donald, I think that this is, and I'm glad that you raised this question. So, we, in the article of impeachment, which, you can read, it's posted online, and outline what the impeachable offense is. And it was inciting a violent insurrection, with evidence outlined in that article. I also understand the Judiciary Committee will be releasing a larger report detailing some findings. And then as part of the trial, if impeachment passes, right, like if we get to that point as part of the trial, that will be articulated. And so this is how the process works. And, I hope that you will continue to be in touch with my office to share your views so that we can make sure that we are adequately moving those forward in my work in the Congress. Thank you so much for joining us during this town hall today. Okay, so let's see. Brandon had a question about student loan forgiveness legislation. So Brandon, thank you for your question. In this last package, you may know that I introduced a standalone bill called the PASS Act, P-A-S-S, and also had written a letter to Secretary DeVos, Betsy DeVos, asking her to extend the loan forgiveness. Well, not forgiveness. It was the loan, what do they call it? Like the period of time until you have to repay your loans, right? It's everybody's payments. Federal loans are on hold right now. And so she chose to take executive action as a result of receiving our letter. That is why the student loan provision was not in this most recent bill, okay? If that is unclear to you, feel free to call our office, 630-549-2190. In terms of moving forward, we know that the president-elect has verbalized an agreement around some what I would consider to be modest student loan forgiveness, and I absolutely am supportive. And student loan forgiveness was included at some level in the HEROES Act, as if you may remember that piece of legislation that passed in the House in May. The word I was looking for was student loan deferment. So our legislation called for student loan deferment. Secretary DeVos took executive action to put that in place. It will be effectively expiring soon. We know that additional action is needed, and I am certainly supportive of continued deferment and loan forgiveness. Thank you for your question. Okay. Okay, Mark had a question. When is the IRS going to start processing paper tax returns from last year? Okay, so Mark, what I would encourage you to do, so there's two things. One, on the IRS website, there is a place for you to be able to check the status of your federal tax return. Would encourage you to take advantage of that. If you check the status and it is unclear or incomplete or inaccurate, please give my office a call, 630-549-2190, and we are happy to help you with that, please. Okay, Merritt has a question about why terrorists were not arrested as they were led out of our capital. As you know, on last Wednesday, there was initial reports that maybe 13 people had been arrested on site. By the end of the day or early Thursday morning, we learned that it had been up to like 50 some. Well, over the last several days, federal law enforcement has been making arrests across the country. And I think that that is very positive, and we will likely continue to receive word of additional arrests to come. But recognizing that we have an upcoming national security event, which is the inauguration, there are some 14 or 15,000 National Guardsmen who are deploying or arriving, I should say, to United States Capitol over the next couple days in order to provide necessary reinforcements to secure the Capitol. That will obviously provide tremendous help, and I think in terms of prevention and deterrence, but then also should something happen to make sure that there is not such a delay. Okay. The Postal Service. Okay, Dean says, a friend of mine mailed a package on December 3rd. His daughter received the package on January 9th. What kind of service is this? The package went to Florida before going to Kansas. I mailed a letter to my cousin in Wisconsin. It took 4 days to get there. What's happening with our Postal Service? Yes, Dean. So obviously there have been considerable delays. I've experienced them. You've experienced them. We know even with the volume of mail at the holidays, the many, many, many packages that the Postal Service has become increasingly unreliable. From all the information I've received, it has its roots in policy decisions that were made by the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, this summer. We took swift action to fund the Postal Service at a higher level to make sure that there would be additional accountability. However, those measures were not matched in the United States Senate. It is my expectation that once the presidential transition occurs and after inauguration next week, we will be able to have a more direct dialogue with the leadership at the Postal Service to return service delivery times to well-established standards and expectations, right? This is about having reliable delivery to that last mile, right? And the Postal Service, let me just be very clear that our postal workers, our letter carriers have been such wonderful members of our communities, such vital public servants. And we want to make sure that they, one, have the resources that they need to do this work, right? Maintain our 6-day delivery, but also that as consumers, if the package is supposed to arrive in 3 days, that it gets there in 3 days. Our first class mail is meeting its established times, and there's too much variability and uncertainty within the system right now. I share your deep concern. I think it's outrageous, and we're looking forward to a swift resolution. Okay, let's see. I lost. Sorry, I'm trying to go in order, everybody, so we don't miss folks. I don't know where we were though. It refreshed. Okay. I was hoping somebody was going to help me. Okay, we did the student loans. Okay. Holly asked about state and local aid that would be passed in this Congress. So we expect President-elect Biden to be supportive and willing to sign additional COVID relief. It is remains a priority of mine to make sure that our communities, even small communities like the ones I represent in the 14th district, are eligible to, directly receive that type of federal support. And we will continue to work to that end ahead of the next COVID relief package. And I hope that we will be able to share some more information about that in the coming weeks. That's for sure. Okay. David had a question about internet in the 14th district. David, I think we've had a chance to talk about this. And what I will tell you is we know that infrastructure investment is something that is a high priority in the COVID relief bills. We have certainly made, I would say, considerable investment in getting folks what I would call interim solutions, right? So like the hotspots. We know that there are some policy changes that need to be made with, for example, maps at the Federal Communications Commission, which we are continuing to pursue, and then trying to make some policy changes to the program eligibility for existing programs so that larger communities like McHenry County, where part of it is rural and part of it is suburban, could still qualify so that we can connect everybody to high-speed internet access. It is vitally important, and our work continues. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Sue's question about cannabis. So at the end of the last Congress, so probably in November, we passed a bill called the MORE Act, M-O-R-E. Hopefully my team can put a link to that bill summary so that Sue can get the information about that. And I suspect that there will be additional cannabis legislation reintroduced in this 117th Congress. As you all know, legislation that passes at the end of a prior Congress that doesn't get through the Senate and signed into law must be reintroduced to be reconsidered. Does that make sense? And so I think that there is additional work that we need to do around cannabis policy, particularly given that states like ours have legalized recreational cannabis. We have many dispensaries across the 14th district, and there are considerable challenges for those legal businesses in Illinois to conduct their business and transactions safely because of existing federal policy. So we will continue to keep folks informed as that cannabis legislation comes to the floor. Okay, let's see. Okay, there is a question about violent protests. I have been very clear that violence is never acceptable. Violence is never the answer to solving disagreements or lodging protests. What we talk about here are peaceful protests. Sometimes law enforcement calls it Article 1 protected free speech. And that is not what we saw last week. It is unacceptable. The attack that was sustained in the United States Capitol, seeking to interfere in our constitutionally outlined process of certifying the presidential election. Okay. Let's see. Brandon has a question about the death penalty. I do not support the federal death penalty, Brandon. And, uh-oh. Sorry, everybody. This keeps refreshing and we lose our place here. So I'm going to do a last call for questions while I try to get to the remaining ones. I'll just start at the bottom here. Okay. We did the MORE Act. Okay, so Catherine Dodd had a question about the Russian hack of the government agencies. We are learning more about that attack, but we know that several agencies were involved. There is a lot of information that is being reported in the press. For example, I've been seeing many news articles from the New York Times that outlines the current status of information that's known. And I think that there's going to be a lot of work to do to reinforce federal systems and work with those private partners who, also had that same type of software installed. There's additional intelligence that we need, but obviously this represents a significant breach and is deeply concerning and, will pose serious challenges as we move forward. We have not seen our federal IT systems breached in this way before. Okay, I want to get to a couple more. Okay, Sarah had a comment about emails. And so Sarah would invite you to call our office if you like to talk to somebody. You are also welcome. Our office phone number is on the screen. I've mentioned it before, but we also routinely do something called office hours. And office hours have been a great tool when we were able to meet in person to sit down and discuss issues that are important, but maybe not appropriate for town halls, right? Like community conversations, maybe one-on-one. And so we scheduled them and we would go all around the district and meet in libraries or city council chambers one-on-one for 10 minutes with constituents. That practice has continued in this virtual format. And so we are going to be, as we continue to get started in this new Congress, sending out announcements about signing up for virtual office hours. Sarah, I highly encourage you to do that. I would welcome the opportunity to talk with you about whatever's on your mind. And if you are not getting alerts or notices from my office, you can sign up for our newsletter at underwood.house.gov. And when the information goes out, just sign up. It's real easy. We'll get on a video chat like this and go through whatever concerns that you have. But I really do look forward to talking with you, Sarah. And thanks again for joining us on our town hall today. Okay, let's see. A couple more questions. Laura had a question about disinformation. So disinformation has been a key problem. In my time on the Homeland Security Committee, we would spend hours talking to social media companies, trying to understand their policies and encourage them to take action to more clearly label, remove disinformation, and make sure that we are very clear about the real life, right? Physical, real life implications of the misinformation that's spread online. So we've seen it impact our elections. We've seen it impact our healthcare, the disinformation surrounding COVID-19, around vaccines. And we've seen, it influence even how we interact with one another in our communities. There are dangerous consequences to this type of disinformation. This work is something that will continue on in this Congress, and it remains a high priority of mine. Thanks so much, Laura, for that question. Okay. I don't see additional topics that we have not covered. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us for this town hall this afternoon. I want to remind you to take good care of yourselves physically, emotionally. It's a challenging time, a difficult week. And last year was filled with so much anxiety and isolation and loss, right? These things can compound. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an incredible emotional toll on all of us. And it's important to remember that it's okay if you're not okay, right? I want to make sure that everybody in the 14th district is connected to resources and support that you may need. And so my office has created a behavioral health resource guide with information on how to get in touch with local organizations in our 7 counties of the 14th and national organizations that have really targeted, focused resources to help support our behavioral mental health. I hope that this guide is going to be a useful resource for you and a reminder that there are so many in our community that are standing ready and willing to help when someone's in a crisis or just needs to talk. So you can find that guide on our website at underwood.house.gov, and I hope that you'll share it with family and friends and neighbors. If you need to be in touch with my office for any reason, you can reach us again at 630-549-2190, online at underwood.house.gov. And then you can follow us on all the socials at Rep Underwood, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I hope you have a safe rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us on this town hall, and I look forward to gathering again together one day soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.